So I'm really excited to be with you tonight. There are a lot of people that I recognize on the call and a lot of new people. And that makes me really excited for the future of Hippology and Quiz Bowl here in Kansas and other states. As Kelsey said, I've been involved with 4-H since I was a member, and that has been 46 years ago, which doesn't seem possible. During my years as a 4-H member, there was not much in the way of Hippology and Quiz Bowl. I remember as an older 4-H'er, we went to a couple of competitions, but it didn't seem to be, at least in my memory, to be as organized as it is today. I began volunteering after I was in college. I came back to Lawrence and was teaching here and did some volunteering. And then I married and moved to Iowa. I volunteered there for a while and took a few years off. And then when my son was old enough to be in 4-H in Iowa, I started back again. And that's when I really became involved with the Hippology and Quiz Bowl. They have a similar event as our Panorama, but they have a few other competitions than we did. But I took some teams up there a few years. And then when we came home to Kansas, really, again, wanted that opportunity for my son. So I became involved again with our county 4-H program. They were not doing organized Hippology at that time. And so I took that over. So throughout all of that time, especially about the second or third year, we realized that we had some youth that were really wanting to really compete and be very serious about it. And then have the talent to go to the national competition. So during that time, I realized that I kind of had a mission to develop competent, knowledgeable youth who were confident in their ability to problem solve equine science and horse training problems. And we used a variety of different learning techniques to accomplish that. My team went to nationals this past January, and that took us 7 years to develop. Our first competition was in 2015, and a couple of years later, we had a couple of other young women join us that wanted to do this, and then I gained two more towards the end here. I had nothing to start with, so everything that I've done, I've developed mostly on my own, utilizing resources off of the internet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So probably the first thing to talk about tonight is what the contest is like. The first part of the contest is the examination phase, and that is two different types of competition. The first is a written test, and those questions are generally multiple choice questions. And then the second part of that phase of the testing is the slide section. In Kansas, in the past, I don't know how it will be this year, but previously our slides in Kansas have been something, sorry, it's been a while since I've done a call, share the screen here, but our slides have been similar to this slide here, where a photo is up on the screen and it simply says, name the coat color. It might say, name the breed. It might be name the marking and so forth. At the national level, they do the slides a little differently. And I prefer this method of sharing or of utilizing the slides here. And with the national contest, they utilize a multiple choice slide. The reason I like this slide better is because it allows our youth more opportunities to get it right. When a youth just sees a photo flashed up on the screen, especially our younger members, for some, they kind of freeze. By giving them the options of the A, B, C, and D, that helps them relax and gives them that opportunity to be right. So the next phase is the station phase, and that phase consists of different posters that have multiple or matching with multiple choice answers. So an example of that would be this poster here, and it has different confirmation faults, and the youth are, you can see down there, maybe there they are, the different choices, and so they match the picture with the choice. Another example of that, this one was a little more involved. I did this at a contest that we did. I had a picture of a halter, and then they had to name all the different parts of the post of the halter. And then another example would be, this is a poster of different patterns, and they had to match the pattern with the horse show class. So there was a Western riding, trail, equitation, reining, horsemanship, and I think a ranch riding pattern. And there weren't any, the kids had to complete this one. They had to kind of read some of the descriptions, and because the one looked like it could be a horsemanship pattern, but it talks about posting. And so that would have been their clue that this was actually an equitation pattern. The next phase is a team problem. And in Kansas, we utilize this for the senior competition only. At least we have in the past. Not sure what we're doing in the future. And our senior teams, they are given a problem and they have a specific set time limit to solve that problem. For instance, they've had to plan a judging clinic. And how would you go about planning that from promotion to execution? They've had to plan a horse show. They've also had to discuss the digestive system and actually build a digestive system out of different materials. At nationals, they had 4 different problems that they had to go through. One, they had talked about different ways to treat wounds on horses. So those can be just about anything you can think of. And for the judging on that, the judges look for communication. Each member of the team needs to speak. They need to have a part in presenting that. They look at how complete their plans are, if they had to do a plan. They also look at specific knowledge, such as the different ways to treat wounds. At nationals, your team has to do some judging as well. They do not give reasons, but they judge 2 halter classes and 2 performance classes. So that's how the contest goes. I like Hippology better than Quiz Bowl, and that's personal preference. And the reason I like it better is that I'm a visual learner, and there's a lot of visual clues in our Hippology contest, where Quiz Bowl is just throwing questions out at them, and it can be a little more difficult for them to get those answers out quickly. But I think it's a very valuable part of the learning experience. So my kids always competed in both Hippology and Quiz Bowl, but I focus more on the Hippology part of our panorama. I think it's really important that you utilize the official resources of the contest. And in Kansas, in the national competition, we use the International Dictionary of Equine Terms. This is a really big, comprehensive book. There's no way, unless you have someone who's extremely intelligent, that you could ever memorize this. So I will tell you later how I use this book in my teaching moments. The next resource is feeding and care of the horse. This is not a resource I used much of. There's a lot of information in all of the resources, and I was most comfortable teaching in another resource that we'll cover here shortly. The Horse Industry Handbook and the Horse Smarts come from the American Youth Horse Council, and those can be ordered online. They are pricey, and it's an investment to do those. Here is an example. I have all of them divided up into different notebooks. I have I think there's 5 different notebooks that they're divided up into. So it is quite extensive, but there's a lot of hands-on activities in this resource. Plus, you will frequently find, especially at nationals, that any pictures most likely are coming out of that resource. So it is an important one to have. Many extension offices do have these as your resource, and our club was fortunate enough to be able to invest in our own set. Another resource is the Kansas Youth Horse Judging Manual, and that can be found online through K-State Extension. Previously in Kansas, we've also used Equus Magazine. I've never utilized that resource in preparing my youth. Again, there's just so many other resources, so much to learn in that I didn't feel like I really needed to do that. Every once in a while, there would have been a question on the slides or somewhere that pulled from that resource, but frankly, I didn't have the time, and no one had a subscription to it. So it wasn't an easy resource for us to utilize. Also, the Kansas 4-H Horse Show Rulebook is utilized, and at nationals, they utilize the AQHA rulebook. My girls did not remember any questions specifically from the AQHA rulebook for nationals, but it was used as their judging resource for the different classes. And then the resource that I utilized mostly was Equine Science by Parker. And I was really glad to see that Kansas updated to utilizing this resource a few years ago. They were still using the horse, which was my college textbook back in 1992. This textbook is geared more towards high school kids. Excuse me for a moment. So it's much easier to teach from. Plus, being a textbook, you will find at the beginning of the chapters, there are the different objectives for that chapter. And then at the end, there are questions and activities for your youth to be able to utilize. I was able to purchase a full set of these on eBay for pretty inexpensively, especially towards the end, because there is a new edition out. We were using the 4th edition, but they currently are utilizing the 5th edition, and that is available on eBay. It has this cover on it. It has 5th edition. It is pricier. If I were to have a team, I don't currently have a team that's preparing to go to nationals. Excuse me. If I did, I would invest in one copy of this and check my information between what my youth have and what is in the newest edition of Equine Science. Originally, we were using edition 3, and there weren't a lot of differences in the information. There were some updated charts, but usually, you know, a horse is a horse is a horse. So there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in those. So those are your study materials. So how we prepared, we had weekly study sessions in the winter. I didn't do any studying during the summer. We have ride nights in our county, and so I would utilize ride nights to teach tack, class descriptions, horse parts. We would go over different horse parts, even on the ride nights. Same thing with tack. Always started with the basics. The Equine Science book starts off with the history and development of horse. And so we kind of would talk about that at our first session, but I really focused on colors, markings, your basic breeds, external parts, the basic Western and English tack, grooming tools, basic feeds, and basic body systems, specifically the digestive system. It seems that a lot of hippology and physical questions are about the horse's digestive system. So we covered that a lot. And then as my girls grew older, then we would add more detailed study sessions for different sections of this book, specifically like with the skeleton, we would just do very basic bones. And then as they grew older, we would get very specific about the tarsals and metatarsals and more scientific names, etc. Same thing with the nutrition of horses, that gets pretty specific. And so that just goes over the younger kids' heads. So we would just be very basic with nutrition, those very basic nutrients that horses would need, etc. So during my study sessions, especially when we were preparing for nationals and my team was getting ready to really hit state hard, we started out with a test and slide identification. So every study session, I had a 15 to 20 question test that they would take, and same thing with the slides. Then we would do a lesson on whatever specific topic we were talking about that night, and then closed out with a group problem. I used questions at the end of the chapter a lot, and I also focused my study sessions pretty specifically on each chapter. As we prepared to go to state, my seniors started meeting twice a week, and I expected them to do some studying on their own, but I recognized that several of my students were in gifted and talented programs and also were pretty active with sports. So studying on their own, they didn't often get an opportunity to do that. So we pretty much just studied during our study sessions. So the materials that I utilized, a lot of my, if you Google Hippology or Horse Quiz Bowl, you can find a lot of online resources, such as old tests from previous competitions. You want to be careful about those, though, because some of those answers are out of date and they come from other resources than what we use, but it will give you an idea of how the questions are written. One of the resources that I use that were online are IDs, the slide IDs from different states. So this notebook has the North Carolina 2013 contest, and my county, there we go. So my county helped me with the color printing. And so this is a resource that we keep. And I would use these like towards the end of a study session. Maybe a couple of kids might have been finished with whatever activity. And so we would use this as an enrichment. I think these are really good for my junior kids too, because it kind of narrows down what they're looking at. I used a lot of lecture time with my senior kids. I would develop PowerPoints, and from the chapter, one of the PowerPoints I developed that they could utilize during our study sessions came from the from our equine science book. And on that equine science book, in the chapter about breeds, there's a big chart. And that's not always an easy way for kids to study. So I took this chart and I developed a PowerPoint that they could utilize during downtime to study. And what it looked like is this. I took the breed, I had photos of the breed, and then I took the information in the chart and put it in bullet points. So that was a way that they could do some visual studying and get the information in a different way. We do a lot of hands-on learning, like parts puzzles. I would always, those kids needed to, especially my seniors, needed to know every external part, like 100% on every test, the skeleton also, etc. We used worksheets. And I start my little kids off with photo flashcards. And I thought I had, oh, here they are. So I made little photo flashcards for my junior kids. And I utilize photos off of like tack catalogs. And so my little kids especially can take these and they can work as partners during a study session and just use flashcards and learn the different grooming tools. I have one with different Western saddles, different English saddles, different breeds, different feeds, etc. And then one of my favorite activities that I did with my kids is that we played Jeopardy. Kids love games. I love Jeopardy. So I took the biggest piece of foam board you can buy it at Hobby Lobby, and I divided it into I think I had 6 sections, and I made little headlines for each one. So that I had breeds and events, and then we could also do English tack. And I would just develop like 25 to 30 questions, like 5 questions, the 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500. I had those little underneath these, like the next card would say 100 and then 200, etc. And I fixed those with magnets. You can use Velcro, but sometimes the glue on the Velcro doesn't hold up. So I use magnets instead. And so that made that Jeopardy board very flexible, and I could change it out each time we did it. And the kids just really enjoyed doing the Jeopardy. I kind of modified it. It wasn't like the true Jeopardy where you just kept going. We would just kind of go from kid to kid and do that. But even my seniors, my 18-year-olds, you would think that they're not really into games, but they really enjoyed that. I also had my kids teach themselves. I would have them pair up and read parts of the chapter together, or they would work on the flashcards. Just getting them together to interact is a great way to teach them. And then we answered questions at the end of each chapter. And I used index cards sometimes for important vocabulary words that I wanted to make sure that they had down pat. So one thing to remember with kids is that every kid learns differently. And I'm a really visual, hands-on learner. And so it's probably why I have spent so much time developing visual aids for my kids to learn from. Some kids learn really well with just lecture, and others need that visual learning experience. Another thing to keep in mind is that each kid is going to have their individual strengths. I had one member of my team who was a genetics expert. This young woman loved genetics, and she was great at it. So she would sometimes help me in teaching some of the basics of genetics. I had another young lady that was really strong in, say, like the different events that writers compete in. And so she would help me with my little kids and teaching them the different events. So you're going to have kids that learn differently. You're going to have kids that retain information differently and get it out from their brain out differently. And one of the things that I learned, especially when I was teaching in the classroom, is, and I know we've gotten a lot away from handwriting and utilizing note-taking, and so many schools are using iPads and whatever, but there is a real connection for kids when their hand is involved in their learning. So I would have coloring sheets, say, of the parts of the heart, and they would use one color to color this part, and they would use another color to color another part. And as they're in the hippology contest, they remember those moments. Oh, I used the red on the left ventricle. That's the left ventricle. So that's another way to help your kids learn the parts, etc. And just for them to make that connection. That's about all I have about how I've developed my teams. It's taken me years to put all of this together. One of the things that I happened to find one time was the horse skeleton thing. It's really simple, and the kids, again, have a hands-on with that. My vet was out one time to do some dental work, and my pony had a broken tooth. I saved the tooth so the kids can touch this tooth and they get an idea of what they feel like. We can do a little bit of the parts of the tooth, etc. I have a collection of horseshoes that they handle, from racing plates to sliding plates to some of the correction plates for shoes. This bag here, if I can't find my sheet that goes with it, but this little baggie is what I use to teach the kids about the digestive system. So each ribbon is a different part of the digestive system. And we literally go from one end of our building to the other with the different parts of the digestive system. And even my little kids who are 10, 8, and whatever, they really grasp the digestive system by using a hands-on learning tool such as this. I've also looked for other opportunities to learn myself. And during COVID, the University of Nebraska had a program that was online, and we, I forget how much we paid to do this, but we all got kits that had different types of hay in them, different feeds. We also received like a stethoscope and thermometer. And so I've utilized all of that in my teachings with my kids too. So I once had a kid ask me if I was a veterinarian, and I laughed because I'm by no way, shape, or form a veterinarian. But I've done enough of this to almost sound like I know what I'm doing. And for those of you who are new to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know enough to teach these kids, you know enough to teach these kids. You just have to be one step ahead of them. And when I was starting out, there were days where I would prep and read my information the day of my learning session, and it was new information to me. So don't be intimidated by not being totally experienced or being a veterinarian or having a degree in equine science. Everybody can do this as long as you have a passion for helping kids and the ability to learn yourself. You can do this. I have one of my team members on our call tonight, Lakin Rorick. Actually, is a second generation 4-H'er. That makes me feel really old, but I'm really proud to have developed a 4-H member who thought so much of our program that she wanted her children to be involved. So I asked Lakin if she would talk just very briefly about why she was involved in Hippology and Horse Bowl and what she gained from that experience. So she's going to unmute herself and talk a little bit here.
Hi everyone. As Bobby said, I'm Lakin. I do want to say that I did not intend to talk, and I told her I should have changed my name once she texted me. But she asked me to just talk a little bit about hippology and what it did for me, and I absolutely loved my years in hippology. Going back, I wish I could have joined younger at the start of 4-H age. Not only did it allow me to develop my leadership skills, my public speaking skills, and all of those things that 4-H generally kind of helps you develop per se, but I also built those lifelong friendships that I will probably have forever. I got to spend twice a week with Bobby, so that was always super fun. And we got to experience really cool things like going to Denver and learning. I'm not a super book smart kid. I was not a super big school person. I would have rather been riding my horse. But hippology kind of brought the two together. There's a lot of biology applied, so it kind of helped me with my biology stuff in school. And it really just allowed me to appreciate horses more in general and just want to be more educated. I love youth and agriculture, and growing up in the program, it made me want to have my own program someday or take over the Douglas County program. So, and the Jeopardy thing, I did want to mention that we did love the Jeopardy thing, and you should absolutely do that with your kids because we had an absolute blast. But yeah, thank you for letting me talk.
So kind of in closing, when I started this, my intention was never to go to the national contest. That was so far out there that I never imagined that I would be capable of doing that. But with this group of young women, with Lakin, I had Paige, Cassidy, and Claire. They really wanted to do this. And knowing how this program impacts the future of our youth and how agriculture and the horse industry specifically are really needing our youth, I felt like I really needed to give my time to them. And I'm so glad I did. I will tell you that Denver, when we went, we had absolutely no expectations of doing well. We were hit by COVID hard, and my county was a county that shut down. So we weren't able to do a lot of in-person studying. And so when we had won in 2019 and should have gone, or 2020 and should have gone in 2021. And so 2021 was canceled. And we were really, really disappointed about that. But then, and we tried to study on Zoom, and that was really hard. But I was kind of glad they canceled it. Sad that we weren't going to get that opportunity. But the state did the state contest again, and we earned first place again and had the ability to go to nationals, and they didn't cancel it on us. So, and at that time, Lakin and Cassidy had both graduated and were at K-State. So they weren't with us to study all of the fall of 2021. They did a little bit on their own, but as you know, your freshman year of college, you're busy studying. So I didn't have them. And then over Christmas break, we spent as much time together during Christmas break reviewing and hands-on activities and doing what we could to maybe catch up on those missed time that we didn't have because they were in college. So we went to Denver with no expectations other than we were going to have fun and we were going to do our best. I figured if we weren't last, we were winners. And as I started calling out the individual awards, Douglas County was being called a lot. And we would have swept the judging contest if one of my girls had not looked down at the wrong time and I did not see the Hunter under saddle horse kind of have a mini blow up. And so she did not do well on that placing. Cassidy was the overall winner on that. And what was the great thing about Cassidy is that she's really not a horse girl. Her family focuses more on cattle, and she rides, but didn't show or anything, but joined us and learned a lot. And she ended up being our national contest winner in the judging contest. And then as they started doing the overall placings, they're calling these states, and you know, we weren't 10th and we weren't 9th or 8th or 7th. I'm like, oh my gosh, we could be top 5. And suddenly we were reserve champions. And the joy and the pride on the faces of those 4 young women made every minute of preparing that. I've probably spent hundreds of hours in producing materials for these kids, studying with them, taking them to the state contest. Every single minute was worth those moments right there. So if you ever get discouraged, know that what you are doing is affecting these young people, and they're probably going to look back with very fond memories of their time in your Hippology, Quiz Bowl, prep nights, or whatever sessions you do, and just know that you are making a difference in their lives. So that's all I have for you tonight. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, with that, I'll give you all a second to add some questions to the chat if you've got them. Right now, Bobby, it looks like we don't have any. I will tell you that we are working on the rules for Panorama right now. It doesn't look like there's going to be any big changes. One change that I will mention is that the horse show rule book is not listed as a source for this year. Because we have made some changes to the qualifying system for state, we are still updating that rule book and we'll plan to have that out January 1st. However, that's not enough time to get that to you. So we will wait. We'll just take that off as one of our resources for this year. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any questions. If you think of questions after tonight's call, you are welcome to email them to me. You should have my email address from when I shared the link with you earlier today. Bobby, thank you very much for sharing your
You're
knowledge with us
welcome.
tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and sign off for this evening, and we will email the link for the recording of tonight's Zoom, and it will also be posted to the 4-H Equine Webinar Series webpage. We'll see you later. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye.